Hello, and thank you for tuning into this one. Let me just get to the point real quick. If you haven't noticed, for a lot of different reasons, uh, the personal privacies that we've all enjoyed and we had thought that were guaranteed to us have been eroding fairly quickly. Uh, Not only has that been happening legislatively, but I guess you could say concurrently with or in collaboration with uh, the, I guess, tremendous advances in technology. And I wanted to address this as well, this topic of privacy, because I recently got a request from a parent, from an adult who asked me to address the issue of privacy as a matter of what goes on in families. But this issue of privacy has gotten to be so significant that I wanted to address it again. I did a video a while back, probably over a year ago, about the importance of privacy and why that's so important to the human psyche. I wanted to give it another go here again, because we're in a acceleration, if you will, of the loss of our privacy, whether that's, as we've known for quite some time, through your phone, being tracked, every signal, every email, everything that you do on the internet and social media is all being tracked. And now your bank accounts and everything else is being tracked. Medical records, in fact, are being tracked. Things that we once thought were extremely private and confidential are no longer. Now that's kind of the lay of the land. That's the landscape here. But again, my forte, if you will, is about talking about why this is important psychologically and spiritually for us. If you don't know who I am, my name is John Solano, and I've been a counselor for over 33 years. My specialty is, in addition to traditional psychology, is transpersonal psychology, which has to do with existential things, the purpose of life, the meaning of life, issues of life and death, as we learn about them through our wisdom teachings that have survived and thrived over thousands of years. And so I bring these things to bear on some of the things that we wrestle with, such as today's topic on privacy. I thought about this a lot, and so just let me nail it here. As I've talked a lot recently about existential issues that we wrestle with, and it's not always easy to understand what that word means. As I understand it, it really has to do with issues of life and death. Why is that of interest to us? Well, as I said in a previous video, life and death are things that we as human beings can't fully understand. They remain mysterious. Consequently, there is an attraction that we have, a curiosity. The human mind is very dedicated to solving mysteries. And so we have fascinations with both. So what is it about privacy that links it to things existential? Well, I guess one way of saying it, or going about it, is to say, none of us are perfect. We all fall short. That is the nature of who we are as human beings. It's surprising how many people don't believe that. Although many people say it, they don't conduct themselves within that reality, that none of us are perfect, that we have really very little consciousness. So, we have to really rely on and lean into our wisdom teachings to kind of know what's going on in the world. And I think this is where we need to go with privacy. That being said, as none of us are perfect, we're all going to step on each other's toes. We're all going to make mistakes in life, if you will. We're going to hurt each other. This is one of the things that is actually missing. This is one of the facts of life that is being challenged. But unfortunately, it's like people are pounding their head against a rock. They're not going to win this one. In other words, there's a certain level of psychology out there that is trying to, I guess you could say, obliterate pain and suffering. Actually, that's never going to happen. It has to exist because of the nature of who we are as human beings. We're imperfect. We don't have a lot of consciousness, and consequently, we're going to step on each other's toes, to put it politely. Now, if you're like me and you've been on the planet for a while, you've stepped on somebody else's toes. You've hurt somebody else's feelings. Your feelings have also been hurt. People have rubbed you the wrong way. People have maybe betrayed you or hurt you in some way. If there was no hope to, I don't want to say remedy that, but to address it, it would be a terrible world to live in. If there was no way for you to improve as a person, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? I mean, because if you're like me, you want to be a better person every day. You want to be a better mom. You want to be a better dad. You want to be a better spouse. You want to be better in the community. You want to make a contribution. We call that growing up to some degree. We call that being a mature person. That's what normal development looks like. It's like a refining process. We want to be better. But how do we go about that? How do we go about that? Well, I'll tell you what, all we have to do is look at the wisdom teachings to tell us. And what do the wisdom teachings tell us? The wisdom teachings stress the importance of solitude and privacy. They go hand in hand. Because as human beings, we have this amazing capability. It's called the ability to change, just not just evolve and adapt like an animal. We can experience a change of mind and a change of heart. You know, there are impacts on us, as I said, that aren't always pleasurable. We might call those traumatic incidences or whatever, and they can leave a mark, and they can cause us to be in the world in a way that isn't a reflection of our best self. But it isn't game over, because we can change. We can have a change of heart. But what it requires for a change of heart is self-awareness and deep self-reflection. And that cannot happen in an environment that is overstimulating, that does not give you a sacred space in order to have that happen. In order for us to come to terms with ourselves, to become aware of something. And then once we become aware of something, it causes us to experience, probably have an emotional experience, which leads to humility. We see that when people realize they've done something wrong and they deeply apologize. And maybe you've deeply apologized to somebody, or somebody has deeply apologized to you. That depth is usually a result of somebody having spent time with themselves in solitude, in privacy, where they were not harassed, not nagged, not put upon by the world. And in that sacred space, they experienced a change of heart, and literally they changed themselves. They changed the way they were being. That is, what do we want to call it? That is essential to who we are as human beings. Not only is it essential for us to grow up and mature, but it's a unique human experience. It's one of the things that makes us amazing. That's why we don't give up hope on ourselves and others, because there's always that possibility of transformation. But in order to get that transformation to happen, it requires privacy. You see that in all wisdom teachings, the suggestion of solitude. Now, privacy isn't only something that we need to deal with our pain and our suffering, in our grief, in our guilt, to transform that. It's also something that we require for innovation, to think up new ideas, so that spark of ingenuity, and that spark of divinity in us can inspire us, can cause us to imagine new things. We can't do that when we're in busy environments, again, when we're being harassed or put upon by the world. We need privacy for that. I also spoke of life as part of the existential connection to privacy. You see, life itself, when you think about the intimacy required between adults in order to conceive that which is sacred, a human life, that is incredibly private. Incredibly private. It calls for incredible levels of vulnerability and trust and risk taking to be in a love relationship with another human being wherein you make love in order to experience the ecstasy that reminds us of how good life is and reminds us of God, and also to conceive a child. You don't see people, if you will, making love and being incredibly intimate in the middle of the street. You don't see that happening. You don't see that happening in the middle of the shopping mall. You don't see that happening in the workplace. In fact, if that were to happen, we would call that pornographic. That's probably the main reason why most of us are so put off by pornography. It's because it's a perversion of something sacred. It's a making public of something that should remain private. And so we require privacy in order to experience intimacy and to make love and to conceive then a child. And we give safety and privacy to the parents who have conceived a child, because that journey is also incredibly intimate and sacred. And then the birthing of the child itself, intimate. In my opinion, is, as people, well, let me just back up on that a little bit. So as we all reside, I think, in this world where there's an inflated sense of narcissism and indulgence, we see along with that people wanting to make public things like that, like the birth of their child, etc. We all love it when children are brought into the world and born, but that experience of birth where the woman is so vulnerable and so emotional, and this child going through this process of coming into the world, and the father also being so vulnerable and so emotional, those things are not for everybody's eyes and ears. That is a bonding moment in that family that requires privacy and protection. It should be revered. You're on sacred ground now. And anytime we're on sacred ground, that calls for high levels of respect and reverence. And so life itself demands privacy. It demands solitude, and that it should be protected. And so there are many very powerful reasons, as I just covered, the human heart needing solitude and a protected space in order to create what it needs to create for transformation, for maturity, to become wise. That's why the road is paved in humility. The road of humility is the road to maturity and wisdom. And that thing, if you will, that creates the humility is often called accountability and responsibility, personal accountability and personal responsibility. That process is something that is best suited for privacy, for a safe and sacred container. As a counselor, that's what I do. I create sacred space for people to come into so they can begin to reflect on what's going on in their lives and begin to see where their thoughts or their actions are not a true reflection of their best self. And when done well, when there's accountability and responsibility, there's humilities, there's often tears, and sometimes there's extreme joy. And I facilitate that also between couples and in families. And that happens in the privacy of my office or the privacy of their living room. You see, we already know this to be true. Imagine a world without privacy now, where you're no longer allowed to have that time to self-reflect, to think of new ideas, to enjoy the intimacy of your spouse, of your family, your loved ones, where everything you do is monitored. And also, I guess you could say measured, engaged. In other words, free thinking, free thought is no longer allowed. In fact, it's criminal. See, that is the kind of situation that we see in authoritarian and dictatorships. People have no privacy, because what happens in privacy is freeing. It's liberation. It's freeing to the human soul. And in communism and dictatorships, they can't have that. But here we have it, and we have to defend it as well. As I said, privacy needs to be protected, whether it's the mother giving birth to a child, or a couple in a family engaged in intimacy and vulnerability, or whether it's somebody who is wrestling with a transgression that they've had and they want to experience a change of heart. We need to protect that. It's so essential to who we are as human beings. I hope I'm speaking to the choir here. But look what's going on around us, folks. And this is how we lose liberty. This is how we lose freedom. This is how we lose privacy. It's always seductive. It's always for our safety or for our convenience. And look at where we are right now. We're supposed to be the cutting edge of consciousness. At no other time in history have we had such immediate access to so much information, and yet the level of anxiety, depression, suicide, and addiction is higher than it's ever been. Look at the levels of division and strife right now in the world. It's higher than it's been in my lifetime. I'm sure your lifetime as well. I never thought I'd see such a thing in my lifetime. So we know it can happen if we don't protect our rights to privacy, freedom of speech, etc. But what anchors that is a moral anchor, a moral foundation. Without that, all there is legislation, and again, having to turn towards technology and other things to monitor. So people have to be monitored, and that's no way to live. So educate your children. Think about it. Talk about it at the dinner table. Talk about it in the discussions you're having. Hope this has been helpful. Take care.